My name is Suzanne, and I'm 27 years old. I live in a small town called Maplewood Heights, where everyone knows everyone else's business. I work as a freelance graphic designer, and most people think I'm just a quiet girl who keeps to herself. But what they don't know about me could change everything. The story I'm about to tell you happened 6 months ago, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. It all started when I got engaged to my boyfriend David, who I'd been dating for 3 years. David was everything I could ask for in a partner. Kind, funny, and he loved me for who I really was, even though he didn't know all my secrets yet. When we announced our engagement, David's family was thrilled. His mother, Mrs. Patricia Coleman, immediately started planning what she called the wedding of the century. She had very specific ideas about how everything should look, especially my wedding dress. She kept showing me pictures of big, puffy white dresses with lots of lace and pearls. "Suzanne, dear," she would say in her sweet but commanding voice, "you simply must wear something traditional, something that shows you're a proper lady joining our family." But I had different plans. You see, there was something about my past that nobody in this small town knew about. Something that made me who I am today, and something that would soon shock everyone at my wedding. 3 weeks before the wedding, I went to pick up my dress from a special tailor in the city. It wasn't the kind of dress Mrs. Coleman expected. It wasn't white, it wasn't puffy, and it definitely wasn't traditional. The dress was a deep navy blue with gold trim, and it had a very specific cut that most people wouldn't recognize. When I brought it home, David's sister Jennifer was visiting. She was 2 years younger than me and had always been a bit jealous that her brother chose me over the other girls in town. When she saw my dress hanging in the closet, her eyes went wide. "Suzanne, what on earth is that thing?" she asked, pointing at my dress like it was something dirty. "It's my wedding dress," I said calmly. Jennifer started laughing, so hard she almost fell off the bed. "That's not a wedding dress. That looks like some kind of weird costume. Are you going to a Halloween party or a wedding?" Her laughter was loud enough that Mrs. Coleman came upstairs to see what was happening. When she saw my dress, her face turned white, then red, then purple. "Suzanne," she said slowly, "please tell me this is a joke." "It's not a joke, Mrs. Coleman. This is what I'm wearing on my wedding day. But it's so unusual. What will people think? What will they say about our family?" I could see the panic in her eyes. In a small town like Maplewood Heights, reputation meant everything. And here I was, about to embarrass her family with what she thought was a strange, inappropriate dress. "I think it's beautiful," I said firmly, "and it means something very special to me." Mrs. Coleman and Jennifer exchanged looks. I could tell they thought I was being stubborn and difficult. They had no idea that this dress represented years of my life they knew nothing about. Over the next few days, word spread around town about my weird wedding dress. People started whispering whenever I walked by. Some of them even had the nerve to ask me directly about it. "Suzanne, honey," said Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store, "are you sure about that dress? I heard it's not even white." "Blue is a lovely color," I replied with a smile. "But for a wedding? That's just not proper, dear." The whispers got louder as the wedding day approached. I heard people talking about me at the coffee shop, at the post office, and even at church. They all seemed to think I was either crazy or trying to be rebellious. David tried to be supportive, but I could tell he was getting pressure from his family too. One evening, about a week before the wedding, he sat me down for a serious talk. "Suzanne, I love you, and I want you to wear whatever makes you happy," he said. "But my mother is really upset. She's worried about what people will think." "What do you think, David?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I think you always have your reasons for things, and I trust you. But maybe you could just tell me why this dress is so important to you." I wanted to tell him everything right then and there, but I knew that the wedding day would be the perfect time to reveal the truth. So I just kissed him and said, "You'll understand soon enough." The morning of the wedding arrived faster than I expected. I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready. When I put on my dress, I looked at myself in the mirror and felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just any dress. It represented something much bigger than a wedding. I could hear people arriving at the church outside my window. The ceremony was set to start at 2 p.m., and it was already noon. My heart was beating fast, not just because I was getting married, but because I knew that in a few hours everyone would learn the truth about who I really was. As I walked into the church, I could hear the gasps and whispers immediately. People were staring at me like I was from another planet. Some of them were pointing, and others were shaking their heads in disapproval. "Would you look at that dress?" I heard someone whisper. "I can't believe she's wearing that to her own wedding. Poor David, having to marry someone so strange." The comment stung, but I kept my head high. I knew that very soon these same people would be eating their words. But as I walked down the aisle, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. Standing in the back of the church, near the exit, was a man in a dark suit who I recognized immediately. My blood ran cold as our eyes met across the crowded room. He wasn't supposed to be here. Nobody from my past was supposed to know about this wedding. But there he was, Agent Morrison, my former handler, watching me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. And that's when I realized this wedding was about to become much more complicated than I ever imagined. Agent Morrison's presence at my wedding sent chills down my spine. I hadn't seen him in over 2 years, not since I left my old life behind and moved to this quiet town. He looked exactly the same, tall, stern, with gray hair and those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through everything. I tried to focus on walking down the aisle, but my hands were shaking. David was standing at the altar with a big smile on his face, completely unaware of what was happening. The pastor was ready to begin the ceremony, and all the guests were settled in their seats, still whispering about my dress. As I reached the altar, I snuck another glance toward the back of the church. Agent Morrison was still there, but now he was talking quietly into what looked like a small device hidden in his jacket. My heart started racing even faster. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of David and Suzanne." I tried to listen to the words, but my mind kept wandering to Morrison. Why was he here? How did he even know about my wedding? And more importantly, what did he want? The ceremony continued and we exchanged vows. David's were sweet and simple, talking about how much he loved me and how he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. When it was my turn, I looked into his eyes and spoke from my heart. "David, you've shown me what it means to have a normal, peaceful life. You've given me hope for a future I never thought I could have. I promise to love you, protect you, and be honest with you about everything." As I said those words, I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't been completely honest with him about my past, but I told myself that after today, after everyone learned the truth about my dress, I would tell him everything. "You may now kiss the bride," the pastor announced. David lifted my veil and kissed me gently. The crowd clapped and cheered, but I noticed that Agent Morrison was no longer in the back of the church. He had disappeared as quietly as he had appeared. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall next door. It was a simple celebration with about 50 guests, mostly David's family and friends from town. The hall was decorated with white flowers and soft lighting, creating a warm and cozy atmosphere. But the warmth didn't extend to some of the guests. As soon as we entered the reception, I could hear the comments about my dress getting louder and more mean-spirited. "I still can't believe she wore that thing," said Mrs. Wilson from the bank. "It's like she's trying to ruin her own wedding." "Maybe she couldn't afford a real wedding dress," suggested Mr. Peterson from the hardware store. "I heard freelance designers don't make much money." Jennifer, David's sister, was particularly vocal. She had gathered a group of her friends around one of the tables, and they were all staring at me and giggling. "I tried to talk her out of it," Jennifer was saying, "but she insisted on wearing that ridiculous costume. I'm so embarrassed for David." "It looks like something from a movie," one of her friends said. like she's pretending to be a soldier or something. They all laughed at that comment, not realizing how close to the truth they were. Mrs. Coleman approached me during the cocktail hour, looking very stressed. "Suzanne, dear, I've been getting so many questions about your dress. People are confused. Maybe you could explain to them why you chose something so unconventional." I smiled at her. "Mrs. Coleman, I think it's time for everyone to learn the truth. Could you gather all the guests together? I have something important to tell them." Her eyes lit up with curiosity. "Of course, dear. Are you going to explain the dress?" "Among other things," I said mysteriously. As Mrs. Coleman went to round up the guests, I noticed David watching me with concern. He could tell something was different about me, but he couldn't quite figure out what. "Suzanne, you seem nervous," he said, taking my hand. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I told him. "But there are some things about me that you and everyone else need to know." Within a few minutes, all the guests were gathered in the main reception area. They were chatting among themselves, probably expecting me to give a simple thank you speech. Mrs. Coleman stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. "Ladies and gentlemen, the bride would like to say a few words." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. The room grew quiet, and I could hear my own heartbeat. This was the moment I had been preparing for, but I was still nervous. "Thank you all for being here today," I began. "I know many of you have been curious about my dress choice. Some of you have even made comments about how strange or inappropriate it is." I paused and looked around the room. I could see uncomfortable expressions on several faces, particularly Jennifer and her friends. But before I explain why I chose this dress, I want to tell you about something that happened to me 5 years ago. Something that changed my life forever. The room was completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving around. 5 years ago, I was living in Washington, D.C., working for a very special government agency. I can't tell you exactly which one, but I can tell you that my job was to protect innocent people from very dangerous criminals. I could see confusion spreading across the faces in the crowd. David was staring at me with wide eyes, clearly shocked by this revelation. During one of my assignments, I was working undercover to stop a group of terrorists who were planning to attack a small town very much like Maplewood Heights. The operation was successful, but something went wrong during the mission. I took a deep breath before continuing. I was captured by the terrorists and held hostage for 3 days. During those 3 days, I was tortured and threatened. They wanted information about other government operations, but I refused to give them anything. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even Jennifer had stopped smirking and was listening intently. On the 3rd day, my team came to rescue me, but during the rescue operation, there was an explosion. I was badly injured and spent 4 months in the hospital recovering. I could see tears in David's eyes now. This was all news to him. After I recovered, I was told that I had earned one of the highest honors that can be given to someone in my position. But because my work was classified, I could never tell anyone about it. The ceremony was private, and I was sworn to secrecy. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small box that I had been carrying all day. Inside was a medal, a beautiful gold star with blue ribbons attached to it. "This is the Medal of Valor," I said, holding it up for everyone to see. "It's given to agents who show extraordinary courage in the face of danger. And this dress that you've all been mocking, it's not just any dress." The room was completely silent as I continued. "This is my dress uniform, the same uniform I wore when I received this medal, the same uniform that represents 5 years of my life spent protecting people like all of you." I could see jaws dropping around the room. Jennifer looked like she might faint. "I wore this dress today because I wanted to honor that part of my life on the most important day of my new life. I wanted to show respect for the sacrifices I made and the service I gave to this country." Suddenly, the main doors of the reception hall burst open. 6 men in dark suits entered the room, moving quickly and purposefully. Leading them was Agent Morrison, and he was heading straight for me. "Suzanne Parker!" he called out in a loud, authoritative voice. "We need to talk. Now." The entire reception hall erupted in chaos. Guests were jumping up from their tables, some screaming, others trying to figure out what was happening. David grabbed my arm protectively, his face pale with confusion and fear. "Who are these people?" he whispered urgently. "Suzanne, what's going on?" Before I could answer, Agent Morrison and his team had surrounded our table. The other agents spread out around the room, keeping watch on all the exits. I could see the fear in everyone's eyes, especially Mrs. Coleman, who looked like she might faint. "Agent Parker," Morrison said more quietly, using my old code name. "I apologize for interrupting your wedding, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." I stood up slowly, my mind racing. "Morrison, I'm retired. You know that. I left the agency 2 years ago." "Retirement doesn't exist in our line of work, and you know it," he replied, "especially not when lives are at stake." Jennifer, who had been silent since my revelation about the medal, suddenly found her voice. "Wait a minute," she said shakily. "Are you saying that Suzanne is some kind of spy?" Morrison looked at her with those cold eyes. "I'm saying that your new sister-in-law is one of the most decorated agents in the history of our organization. And right now, we need her help." David was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Suzanne, is this true? Are you really a government agent?" I took his hands in mine. I was David, but that part of my life is over. I came to Maplewood Heights to start fresh, to be normal, to be with you. "But you never told me," he said, his voice breaking. "We're married now, and I don't even know who you really are." Before I could respond, Morrison stepped closer. "Agent Parker, we have intelligence that the Crimson Hand organization has discovered your location. They're planning to attack this town tonight as revenge for what you did to them 5 years ago." The blood drained from my face. The Crimson Hand was the terrorist group I had helped take down during my last mission. They were the ones who had captured and tortured me. I thought they were all in prison or dead. "That's impossible," I said. "We got all of them. The entire organization was destroyed." "That's what we thought too," Morrison replied grimly. "But 3 of their top members escaped from federal prison last month. They've been tracking you ever since." Mrs. Coleman, who had been listening to every word, suddenly spoke up. "Excuse me, but what does this have to do with our town? We're just simple people living quiet lives." Morrison turned to face the crowd of wedding guests. "Ma'am, these terrorists don't care about innocent people. They want revenge against Agent Parker, and they're willing to hurt anyone who gets in their way. That includes all of you." A wave of panic spread through the room. People were crying, hugging each other, and some were trying to head for the exits. But the agents blocked their way. "Nobody leaves until we can guarantee your safety," Morrison announced. "This building is now under federal protection." I felt sick to my stomach. This was exactly what I had feared when I left the agency. I had hoped that by disappearing into a small town, I could keep the people I cared about safe from my dangerous past. "How much time do we have?" I asked Morrison. "Our satellites picked up movement about an hour ago. A group of armed men are heading this way in 3 black SUVs. They should arrive within the next 2 hours." David was still holding my hand, but I could feel him pulling away emotionally. "So everything about our relationship has been a lie?" he asked quietly. "No, David. My feelings for you are real. Everything I told you about loving you and wanting a future with you is true. I just couldn't tell you about my past because it would have put you in danger." "Well, we're in danger now anyway," he said bitterly. Morrison cleared his throat. "Agent Parker, we need to evacuate the town immediately. But first, we need your help to coordinate the operation. You know these terrorists better than anyone." I looked around the room at all the scared faces. These people had spent the last few weeks mocking me, calling my dress weird and making fun of my choices. But now their lives were in danger because of me. Mrs. Wilson from the bank was crying in the corner. Mr. Peterson from the hardware store was trying to comfort his wife. Even Jennifer, who had been so cruel about my dress, looked terrified. "I'll help," I said firmly, "but I have conditions." "You're not in a position to make conditions," Morrison replied. "Yes, I am," I said, my voice getting stronger. "These people are under my protection now, and I'm not going anywhere without my husband." David looked surprised when I called him my husband. Despite everything that had happened, we were still married. Morrison nodded. "Fine, but we need to move fast." He pulled out a tablet and showed me a map of the town. "The Crimson Hand is approaching from the north. They'll likely try to surround the town and then move in on this location. We have 6 agents here, but we're expecting at least 12 terrorists." I studied the map carefully. "What about the local police?" "We've already contacted Sheriff Rodriguez. He's evacuating the residential areas and setting up roadblocks. But his department only has 4 officers, and they're not equipped for this kind of fight." As I was looking at the map, I noticed something that made me smile grimly. The guests couldn't see it, but I recognized the strategic advantage we had. "Morrison, do you remember the Riverside operation from 3 years ago?" His eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to use the same tactic here?" "Exactly, but we'll need to modify it for a civilian environment." I turned to address the wedding guests, who were all watching me with a mixture of fear and newfound respect. "Listen, everyone, I know you're scared, and I know this is all my fault. But I promise you this, I'm going to keep you safe. All of you." Jennifer stood up slowly. "Suzanne, I'm sorry about what I said about your dress. I didn't know." "It's okay, Jennifer. You didn't know the whole story." "But it's not okay," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "I was mean to you for no reason, and now you're risking your life to protect us." Other guests began speaking up too. Mrs. Wilson approached me with tears in her eyes. "I said terrible things about you, dear. I judged you without knowing anything about your sacrifice." "We all did," added Mr. Peterson. "You've been protecting people like us your whole career, and we treated you badly." I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't expected. These people were apologizing, showing me kindness I never thought I'd receive from them. But our moment of reconciliation was interrupted by the sound of Morrison's radio crackling to life. "Base to team leader," came an urgent voice. "We have a problem. The targets have changed course. They're not coming from the north anymore." Morrison grabbed the radio. "What's their new position?" "They've split into 2 groups. One is approaching from the south, and the other is coming from the east. And, sir, they're moving much faster than we anticipated." Morrison's face went pale. "How much time do we have?" 20 minutes, maybe less." The room fell silent again. 20 minutes wasn't enough time to evacuate everyone safely. We were going to have to make our stand right here in the reception hall, with a room full of innocent people. But as I looked around at the faces of the wedding guests, I realized something had changed. They were no longer looking at me with mockery or judgment. They were looking at me with hope. And that's when I heard it, the distant sound of helicopters approaching. But these weren't rescue helicopters. Agent Morrison was shouting into his radio, "We have incoming aircraft. This is not part of our operation. I repeat, we have unidentified helicopters approaching the target location." The sound was getting louder, and through the windows, I could see dark shapes against the evening sky. The Crimson Hand had brought more firepower than we had anticipated, and they were about to turn my wedding reception into a battlefield. The helicopters were getting closer, and I could see the panic spreading through the room like wildfire. But I knew that panic would get everyone killed. I had to take control of the situation immediately. Everyone listen to me. I shouted over the noise of the approaching aircraft. I need you to stay calm and follow my instructions exactly. Your lives depend on it. Morrison was barking orders into his radio, while his agents took positions around the room. All units, this is a code red situation. We have multiple aircraft incoming, and we're dealing with civilian casualties. I grabbed David's shoulders and looked directly into his eyes. David, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? He nodded, though I could see the fear and confusion still written all over his face. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me organize the guests. We have to get everyone away from the windows and into the safest part of the building. The sound of the helicopters was deafening now. Through the large windows of the reception hall, I could see 2 black aircraft hovering above the parking lot. Ropes were being dropped from their sides, and dark figures were sliding down them. They're landing. Morrison shouted, We have approximately 30 seconds before they breach the building. I quickly scanned the room, using my training to assess our defensive options. The reception hall had 2 main exits, one leading to the church and another leading to the parking lot. There were also several large windows that could be used as entry points. Mrs. Coleman, Jennifer, I need you to help me move everyone to the back corner of the room, away from the windows, I instructed. David, help me flip these tables over to create barriers. To my surprise, people responded immediately. Even though they were terrified, they trusted me to keep them safe. Mrs. Wilson was helping elderly guests move to safety, while Mr. Peterson was working with David to create makeshift barricades. Jennifer grabbed my arm as we were moving people. Suzanne, I'm so sorry for everything I said. You're trying to save us, and I was so horrible to you. We'll talk about that later, I replied. Right now, I need you to stay with the children and keep them calm. Agent Morrison appeared at my side. Parker, we've got movement at all entrances. They're surrounding the building. How many? I asked. At least 15, possibly more. They're heavily armed and wearing body armor. I felt a chill run down my spine. The Crimson Hand had come prepared for war. Suddenly, the lights in the reception hall went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows across the room. In the dim light, I could see the terrified faces of the wedding guests huddled behind the overturned tables. They've cut the power, Morrison said grimly. Standard terrorist tactic. They want to disorient us before they attack. A voice echoed through the darkness, amplified by some kind of speaker system. It was a voice I recognized immediately. Viktor Petrov, the leader of the Crimson Hand cell I had helped capture 5 years ago. Agent Sarah Parker, the voice called out. I know you're in there. You destroyed my organization and killed my brother. Now it's time for you to pay. The guests looked at me with wide eyes. They were just learning that my real name wasn't even Suzanne. You have 2 minutes to come outside with your hands up, Victor continued. If you don't, we will kill everyone in that building, starting with your new husband. David's face went pale when he heard that. Sarah or Suzanne, whoever you are, you can't go out there. They'll kill you. And if I don't go, they'll kill all of you, I replied. Morrison shook his head. We're not letting you sacrifice yourself. We'll find another way. But I was already formulating a plan. I knew Victor and his methods better than anyone. He was arrogant and predictable, which could work to our advantage. Morrison, do you still have those smoke grenades in your tactical kit? I asked. Yes, but what are you thinking? I'm thinking we use the same strategy that worked in Prague, but this time we have home field advantage. I turned to address the wedding guests. I need everyone to listen very carefully. In about 5 minutes, this room is going to fill with smoke. When that happens, I need you to stay exactly where you are and breathe through your clothes. Don't move, don't speak, and don't panic. Mrs. Coleman raised her hand shakily. But what about you, dear? What are you going to do? I'm going to end this, I said simply. Victor's voice boomed through the speakers again. 1 minute, Agent Parker. I'm getting impatient. I quickly removed my wedding veil and began taking off the outer layer of my dress uniform. Underneath, I was wearing a fitted black bodysuit that I had put on earlier as a precaution. Old habits from my agent days. Sarah, what are you doing? David asked, alarmed. I'm getting ready to do what I was trained to do, I replied. But David, there's something I need you to know. If something happens to me tonight, I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Tears were streaming down his face. Nothing's going to happen to you. I won't let it. You can't stop what's about to happen, I said gently. But you can help me by keeping everyone here safe. Morrison handed me a small earpiece and a tactical vest. Parker, you don't have to do this alone. My team can provide backup. No, Morrison. This is personal. Victor wants me, and he's going to get me. But not the way he expects. I checked the weapon Morrison had given me and secured it in my holster. As I was preparing to leave, Jennifer approached me one more time. Suzanne, Sarah, I just want you to know that I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. And I'm proud that you're part of our family. Her words touched me more than she could know. This was the same girl who had mocked my dress just hours earlier, and now she was treating me like a hero. Take care of David for me, I told her. I was about to move toward the exit when Victor's voice came through the speakers again, but this time it was different. There was panic in his voice. Agent Parker, we know you're planning something. We have snipers positioned on every building around this location. If you try any tricks, we will start executing hostages. My blood ran cold. Snipers meant they could see into the building. They might already know about our defensive positions. But then I heard something that made my heart skip a beat. In the distance, barely audible over the sound of the helicopters, I could hear sirens. Multiple sirens getting closer. Morrison was listening to his earpiece with a confused expression. That's impossible, he muttered. What's impossible? I asked. I'm getting reports of federal backup arriving, but we didn't call for backup. Through the windows, I could see flashing lights in the distance. Police cars, federal vehicles, and what looked like military transports were heading toward the town. Victor's voice came through the speakers again, but this time he sounded angry and confused. What is this? We have unexpected vehicles approaching from multiple directions. I grabbed Morrison's radio. Who authorized the backup? I don't know, but whoever it is, they're saving our lives, he replied. The sirens were getting louder, and I could see Victor's men starting to panic outside. They had planned for a simple hostage situation, not a full-scale federal response. But then, through the chaos, I heard Victor's voice one more time, and what he said made my blood turn to ice. If I can't have my revenge on Agent Parker, then I'll make sure nobody leaves this building alive. Men, prepare the explosives. We're bringing this whole place down. The reception hall erupted in screams as people realized what he meant. Victor wasn't just planning to kill me. He was planning to blow up the entire building with everyone inside. And based on the sound of mechanical beeping that was now coming from somewhere in the walls, he had already started the countdown. The beeping was getting faster, which meant we had very little time. My training kicked in immediately, and I began scanning the room for possible bomb locations. The sound seemed to be coming from multiple directions. Morrison, we need to evacuate now. I shouted over the chaos. The exits are blocked, he replied. Victor's men have the building surrounded, and the backup units are still 2 minutes away. I could see the terror in everyone's eyes. Mrs. Coleman was praying quietly, while David was trying to comfort some of the younger guests. Jennifer was holding a crying child, whispering that everything would be okay. But I knew something they didn't. During my years with the agency, I had studied Victor's methods extensively. He was a showman who loved to create fear, but he was also practical. He wouldn't blow up the building while his own men were still positioned around it. Morrison, get on the radio, and tell the backup units to create a distraction on the north side of the building," I ordered. "Make it loud and visible." "What are you planning, Parker?" "Victor won't detonate those bombs while his men are in the blast radius. But if we can get him to move his people away from the building—" I didn't finish the sentence because I was already moving. I grabbed the tactical vest Morrison had given me and checked my weapon one more time. Then I did something that surprised everyone in the room. I walked over to where my wedding dress was hanging and carefully removed the Medal of Valor from my purse. I pinned it to my tactical vest, right over my heart. "Sarah, what are you doing?" David asked. "I'm going to end this the way it should have ended 5 years ago," I replied. "But first, I need to tell all of you something." I turned to face the room, full of wedding guests. "I know that many of you made fun of my dress today. You thought it was weird, inappropriate, or just plain wrong. But I want you to know that your opinions don't matter to me anymore." The room was silent except for the ominous beeping of the bombs. "What matters to me is that you're good people who deserve to live. You have families, dreams, and futures ahead of you, and I'm not going to let a terrorist take that away from you." Jennifer stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, I was so wrong about you. I was jealous and mean, and I said terrible things. But you're still willing to risk your life for us. That's what this uniform represents," I said, touching the medal on my chest. "It represents the promise I'm made to protect innocent people, even when they don't understand or appreciate that protection." Mrs. Wilson spoke up from her corner. "We understand now, dear. We see who you really are." "You're a hero," added Mr. Peterson. "You always were, even when we were too blind to see it." The beeping was getting even faster now. We were running out of time. Morrison's radio crackled to life. "Team leader, the backup units are in position. They're creating a diversion on the north side as requested." Through the windows, I could see explosions and flashing lights on the far side of the building. Victor's voice came through the speakers, shouting orders to his men to investigate the disturbance. "Perfect," I said. "Morrison, give me 60 seconds, then lead everyone out through the south exit. The backup units should be able to provide cover." "What about you?" David asked desperately. "I'll be right behind you," I lied. We both knew I was planning something dangerous. I moved toward the main entrance, staying low and using the overturned tables for cover. The beeping was so fast now that the individual beeps were almost merging together. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time to look at my wedding guests. These people who had mocked me, judged me, and made fun of my choices were now looking at me with respect, gratitude, and love. "Thank you," I called out to them. "Thank you for giving me a reason to be better than I thought I could be." Then I kicked open the door and stepped out into the night. Victor was standing in the parking lot, surrounded by his remaining men. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with savage pleasure. "Agent Sarah Parker," he said with a cold smile. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered. It's a shame I'm going to have to kill you." "Victor Petrov," I replied calmly. "You're under arrest for terrorism, murder, and really bad timing." He laughed. "You think you're in control here? I have enough explosives in that building to level half the town, and the detonator is in my hand." I looked at the device he was holding. It was a remote trigger with a red button, and his thumb was hovering over it. "You know what, Victor? You're right. You do have all the power here, but you've made one crucial mistake." "What mistake?" he asked, his confidence wavering slightly. "You assumed I came out here to surrender." Before he could react, I activated the smoke grenade Morrison had given me. The parking lot filled with thick, white smoke, and I heard Victor cursing in multiple languages. But the smoke wasn't just for cover. It was also a signal to the backup units that had been waiting for my cue. The federal agents moved in from all directions, using the smoke as cover. I could hear gunshots and shouting as they engaged Victor's men. In the chaos, I managed to tackle Victor to the ground. We struggled for control of the detonator, rolling across the asphalt in our desperate fight. "You destroyed everything I built," he screamed at me. "My organization, my family, my life." "Your organization was built on murder and terror," I replied, trying to wrestle the detonator away from him. "You destroyed your own life the moment you chose to hurt innocent people." The detonator slipped from his hands and skittered across the ground. We both lunged for it, but I was faster. I grabbed it and immediately threw it as far as I could into the darkness. Victor pulled out a gun and pointed it at me. "It doesn't matter. I have backup detonators. Everyone in that building is still going to die." But as he spoke, I could hear the sound of people running. Morrison was leading the wedding guests out of the building, and the backup units were providing cover fire. "Actually, Victor," I said with a smile, "everyone's already safe. You lose." His face twisted with rage as he realized his plan had failed. But before he could pull the trigger, a federal sniper took him down with a single shot. The parking lot fell silent except for the sound of sirens and the voices of the rescue teams. I stood up slowly, my wedding dress torn and dirty, but alive. David came running toward me, followed by Jennifer, Mrs. Coleman, and all the other wedding guests. They surrounded me with hugs, tears, and words of gratitude. "Sarah, you did it," David said, holding me tightly. "You saved everyone." "We all saved each other," I replied. "You believed in me when I needed it most." Mrs. Wilson approached me with tears in her eyes. "Dear, can you ever forgive us for the way we treated you?" "There's nothing to forgive," I said genuinely. "You didn't know who I was. But more importantly, you showed me who you really are when it mattered." Over the next hour, bomb disposal experts searched the building and found 4 explosive devices. They were all successfully disarmed, and the reception hall was declared safe. As the chaos died down, I found myself sitting on the steps of the church with David, still wearing my torn dress uniform with the Medal of Valor pinned to my chest. "So what happens now?" David asked. "Are you going back to the agency?" "No," I said firmly. "I meant what I said in my wedding vows. I want a normal life with you, but I also want to be honest about who I am." "And who are you?" I thought about his question for a moment. "I'm Sarah Parker, former federal agent. I'm also Suzanne Coleman, your wife. And I'm someone who learned that being true to yourself is more important than what other people think." Jennifer approached us hesitantly. "Sarah, I wanted to give you something." She handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a beautiful silver frame with a photo from our wedding ceremony. Me in my dress uniform, standing proud and strong. "I had the photographer take this picture right after you revealed the truth about your dress," she said. "I wanted you to have it as a reminder of how brave you are." I looked at the photo and smiled. In it, I could see the respect and admiration in the guests' faces as they realized who I really was. "Thank you, Jennifer. This means more to me than you know." Agent Morrison approached us as we were getting ready to leave. "Parker, I have to ask one more time. Are you sure you don't want to come back to the agency? Your country could use someone with your skills." "My country has someone with my skills," I replied. "She's just going to use them to protect a small town instead of the whole world." He smiled and shook my hand. "Well, if you ever change your mind, you know where to find us." As the federal agents packed up their equipment and left, the wedding guests began to disperse. But before they left, each one of them made a point to thank me personally. Mr. Peterson shook my hand firmly. "You're the finest person I've ever met, Sarah, and I'm proud to call you a neighbor." Mrs. Wilson hugged me tightly. "You showed us what real courage looks like, dear. We'll never forget that." Even the younger guests who had laughed at my dress came up to apologize and express their admiration. As David and I walked home together, still in our wedding clothes, I reflected on the events of the day. It had started with mockery and judgment, but it had ended with respect and understanding. "You know," David said, I think this might be the most memorable wedding in Maplewood Heights history. I certainly hope so, I replied, because I never want to have to prove myself like that again. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then David asked, "Are you going to keep the dress?" I looked down at my torn and dirty uniform with the Medal of Valor still pinned to the chest. Yes, I think I will. It represents both parts of my life, who I was and who I'm becoming. And who are you becoming? I smiled and took his hand. I'm becoming someone who doesn't hide from her past, but doesn't let it define her future either. I'm becoming someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. And most importantly, I'm becoming someone who knows that the people who matter will love you for who you really are. As we reached our house, I turned to take one last look at the town I had risked everything to protect. The people who had mocked my wedding dress would never look at me the same way again. They had learned that judging someone based on appearances could be dangerous, and that true courage comes in many forms. But more than that, they had learned that the quiet woman who lived among them was someone special, someone who had dedicated her life to protecting others, and who would continue to do so in whatever way she could. My wedding day had been filled with snickers and whispers about my dress. But in the end, that weird outfit had revealed the truth about who I really was. And sometimes that's exactly what the world needs. A reminder that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that you should never judge someone until you know their whole story. As I hung up my dress uniform that night, with the Medal of Valor still pinned to the chest, I realized that this was the perfect ending to my old life and the perfect beginning to my new one. I had gotten my revenge, not through cruelty or anger, but through courage and compassion. And that was the most satisfying victory of all.